GoldenEye 007 is back, officially released for both the Xbox and Nintendo Switch, and let's get right down to the point. While both versions are good, they could have been so much better, and while certainly faithful enough to the original source material, and overall I think both versions are of a decent quality, especially for the fans, it's 2023, and we expect better. The original 1997 version of the game on the Nintendo 64 is legendary and needs no further discussion. However, its complicated licensing issues meant that it took some false starts and years of negotiation and waiting until it was officially announced to be coming back as a first ever console release since 1997. That in of itself is huge, as many of us believed that GoldenEye would be lost in licensing hell. And in today's episode, I'm going to give you my thoughts on the good and the bad of GoldenEye 007 on both the Xbox and the Nintendo Switch. So let's get right down to business. Both versions of GoldenEye, that is, the Xbox and Nintendo Switch, are running emulation, and both have been developed by different studios. Code Mystics handled the Xbox port. Their in-house developed N64 emulator powers other releases in the Rare Replay collection, and the Nintendo Switch version is bundled with the Nintendo Switch Online service that has been developed by Nintendo Europe R&D division. What this means is, other than the launch date being simultaneous, there's really no parity between these versions. For example, the Nintendo Switch version features online multiplayer thanks to its built-in online features, but the Xbox version doesn't support online multiplayer at all. The Nintendo Switch version has no additional enhancements made other than the 16:9 widescreen support, which was already built into the game to begin with, but it still required it to be updated on the emulation side to support it. And the Xbox version has a much improved control system that is very welcome in 2023 and up to 4K rendering. However, this is all against the base N64 textures, which are of a much lower resolution, and this upscaling introduces artifacting such as Z-fighting, visible edges, seams, and texture issues. As a result, both versions have their own unique problems. The Nintendo Switch version runs well with smoothed out performance, but keep in mind it's capped at 30 FPS, and while it's quite good, the biggest issue with the Switch version is the controls. They are almost unplayable in its default state. Now, as someone who's quite familiar with the game and played it many times, for me this is muscle memory, but for most people the controls are just not good enough. GoldenEye plays best with a Nintendo 64 controller, and while the game does take advantage of the N64 controller for the Nintendo Switch, this item is practically a unicorn, and many of us simply don't possess one. There are guides that can help you with a somewhat decent remapping of the game, but no matter which way you go, the controls just aren't right. It's a shame that Nintendo couldn't implement a default dual analog control scheme in the game, as I don't feel like it would have taken too much effort, but here we are. The Xbox version, on the other hand, controls like an absolute dream, and I really like how it feels. It has a smart control scheme, and the game has been modified to handle this. I also like the 16:9 support here in the game as well, and there are definitely some moments where the game can look quite good. On the other hand, like the Switch version, the Xbox port has improved frame rates, but caps at 30 FPS. Now let's be honest, it's 2023 and we expect better. In fact, some community PC emulators such as 1964, which incidentally has been around since the early 2000s, has had the ability to not only run GoldenEye at 60 frames per second, but to also enhance font textures, which are a bit of a blurry mess on an upscaled Xbox. You can clearly see the differences here. And while this isn't perfect, it would be closer to something that many of us expected to see. Code Mystics claimed that 60 FPS broke things during their development, and as is the nature of emulation, I certainly believe them. Things do need to be rock solid when you ship a game, and possibly this was the case of not enough time or budget to flesh out a 60 FPS version. But I have another thought and opinion on this. Simply put, my belief is that the agreement made to bring both GoldenEye to the Nintendo Switch and the Xbox meant that the game could not be brought to either console with significant enhancements, and here we are. The Xbox has better controls but gives up online multiplayer. The Nintendo Switch has online multiplayer, but there is no enhanced control scheme, and both versions of the game do not run with an uncapped frame rate. The Xbox version also has frame pacing issues. GoldenEye has always been a difficult game to emulate correctly, and this appears to be a part of the dynamic recompilation caching up its next block of instructions. Drops like this are common with emulation, so it's possible that it's occurring here. The frame pacing for me is the single most annoyance of the Xbox version, and I do hope that it can get patched. In some cases, I feel like I'm walking in quicksand. I also mentioned graphical issues such as clipping, warping textures, Z-fighting, and visible edges. Now, to be clear, all these are present in the original N64 version. Increasing native resolutions only amplify these issues and making it more distracting to the player, especially if they haven't experienced the original game before. But this is only a good reminder that Rare indeed developed an unreleased and cancelled native Xbox 360 version of GoldenEye for the Xbox Live Arcade all the way back in 2007. You can still see the visual updates this version brings to the game. Sadly, this version appears to have been abandoned, and both Microsoft and Nintendo refuse to acknowledge that it ever existed. Personally, I'm not sure why this version wasn't used as the baseline for this release on both the Nintendo Switch and the Xbox. For starters, this version is a port of the original source code, and there is no emulation at all. This means developers have more control over frame rates, textures, lighting, AI, controls, multiplayer. GoldenEye 007 XBLA is one of those releases that many of us were expecting to resurface as the basis of this 2023 update, but sadly it wasn't to be. Now, I do want to be very clear that this is not the fault of Code Mystics that worked with what they had. It's just that, like everything else about this release, it could have been so much better. The sound in both versions is good, but not great. There was a little bit of a scare where Nintendo posted a clip on Twitter that appeared to be the poor screen with missing instruments, but fortunately all this is fine in-game. Over on the Xbox, the sound is pretty good, but does appear to be somewhat compressed over the original that has a much cleaner and larger dynamic range. Nitpicky, sure, but some die-hard fans will definitely notice this. We also mentioned that the Switch version is available on the NSO service, and the Xbox version is available as an update to Rare Replay, and is also available on Game Pass. However, this is also a frustration that I have. It's clear that the powers that be don't want you to actually own a copy of GoldenEye, rather have a way for you just to play it. For those that own a physical copy of Rare Replay like myself, I was expecting to be able to download an update and play it. This game only permits you to play it if you've purchased a digital version of Rare Replay or on Game Pass. So for those people that own a physical copy of Rare Replay, unfortunately you will not be able to play GoldenEye. It's as simple as that. It feels like this game is being paraded around as some type of showpiece, and then who knows what's going to happen in the future. Once these online services disappear, GoldenEye will disappear along with it, and that is a shame. In conclusion, what we have here isn't bad. It has its issues, sure, but the fun factor and nostalgia is certainly not lost here. The game hasn't aged well, but damn, it's still fun to play all those years later. Overall, it's a decent enough version, I suppose, but could have been so much better with some more time and effort. Unfortunately, I don't feel like we're going to see any additional quality of life updates to either version of the game, and that's just the way it is. In many ways, we should just be thankful that we're actually playing GoldenEye in 2023 on modern consoles, but as we've seen, things could have been so much better. But we are going to leave it here for this episode. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, don't forget to leave me a thumbs up, leave a comment below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now.